So just as I thought I was out of Titan's Return toys to talk about, hey, here comes another one. And this one was released pretty strangely as the very first Transformer to be a Walgreens exclusive. Walgreens, not Walmart. A little bit strange. But hey, however it manages to make its way to the marketplace, that's perfectly fine with me. So we're going to take a look at Titan's Return Brainstorm, completing the G1 Headmasters in this new line at the deluxe size. Though this one not quite as smooth as the others, as this of course is not Brainstorm's mold. As you can probably tell by some of the leftover components, this is a very, very extensive remold of Blur. We'll get to a comparison in a bit, and there's definitely some detailing that still lends itself to its original form, but for now, we're going to take a look at it for what it is. So, of course, we got that one-man space dogfighter style vehicle mode that the original Brainstorm's known for. A little bit different. The cockpit's sitting a lot farther forward. Of course, that's just where the cockpit is on Blur, of course. And there is some remolding along here in the front to kind of make it look a little bit closer to the original. Of course, the biggest piece is probably there in the front, replacing Blur's shield with the nose cone. And, wow. Here's the thing. All of this massive sea of blue that you see, all paint. If we take a look underneath on this little skiff landing gear thing that we'll see later on, all gray plastic molding. So a lot of paint went into this toy just to get it into the right colors. The colors being a very nice light gray, and then kind of a mid-tone gray going all the way through the vehicle. And then, of course, here in this main front section is what most photographs and even my viewfinder right now is telling me is a light blue, but it's actually closer to a teal or turquoise color, which I don't mind. It still looks nice. It's the hit of color that the vehicle mode really needs. And most of it here is done in paint. Once we get into the core parts of the toy, it starts getting into molded plastic. But cockpit, of course, is done up in translucent yellow. And then, as we've mentioned, everything in the front, all paint. I'm going to go ahead and remove the storage for the weapon, and that is really, really snug in there. Hang on, come on. It's the embarrassing part of the review where something that I hadn't quite tested out before isn't quite cooperating with me. Wow, that's a really tight fit. So, of course, yes, it's supposed to look like the original G1 vehicle mode, though there are plenty of downsides to that. There's a lot of little molded details I do like, little vents and little tiny bits of molding that you can find here and there. I like all this little groove work along the wing. However, we do get to this back section where it's pretty much the rear section of Blur. Nothing's really done to it except that antenna swapped out for a tail fin, of which, of course, he's supposed to have 2 of them. And then, of course, you still have this really sleek, subtle arch line going all the way through that makes them look very aerodynamic in a way that spaceships don't need. But it also makes them look quite a bit like Blur. So if we actually bring out such a mold, you can definitely see where the original vestiges of the toy remain. I think what's keeping this from really making a good Brainstorm, well, it's still a decent Brainstorm, but I think what's really holding it back is not only is the cockpit too far forward, his vehicle mode's known for having it like toward the back, it's also this section here that's sleeked down. This really doesn't suit the original toy. I feel like if this piece had been molded into that more blocky shape and could have allowed for the 2 tail fins, I think it would have done a lot to separate this toy from Blur. As it stands, though, it's not a bad attempt. I will say on one side that might disappoint some people, these guns on the front do not come off, even though the Voyager Generations toy and the G1 toy, these were his individual handguns. Here they're solid components. And if you're wondering why the barrels aren't gray, that's because that's how the G1 toy looked. This is pretty much going for the G1 toy as far as deco and paint job goes, so why not? That's pretty much how it goes. And unfortunately, they don't come off. So it's a little bit of a downside. Nothing too heinous, though. Let's go ahead and take a look at the Titan Master that rides inside. This one being Teslor, which is supposed to be a stand-in for Arcana. Now, the molding is not really matching his original Headmaster, though they do try in colors, and They tried to get the face painted, but on mine they missed half the visor. So it doesn't look all that great on mine. He's just a little bit off, which is kind of unfortunate. You know, you finally get a little bit of paint on one of these Titan Masters, and they don't really get to it. And since everyone mentions it in the videos, yes, he has a big face on his back. What else do you expect them to do with that face? Anyway, yep. If you haven't seen one of these before, you have a ball joint here in the neck. You have a ball joint in the shoulder, and then it's a double hinged for the hips and the knees. Very limited articulation, but hey, it's there should you want it. Gonna go ahead and fold him up, get him ready for robot mode, which is what we need to do here. Now, there is one thing about this toy that I should point out. There is the San Diego Comic-Con version, which has more of a clear window and has gray barrels. So if you want a slightly different deco, you can go to that as a particular option. This is leaning more toward recreating the G1 figure. It's also where I realize I've already reviewed this mold twice already, technically, as two different types of blur. Yeah, so I'm very familiar with this transformation by now. So it's a transformation I like, thankfully. I do think it's utilizing its parts very well and does a pretty good job of transforming the figure. And I mean, as a visual thing rather than just, you know, hey, the parts are moving around. No, it's a fun transformation. I tend to like it, and there's nothing terribly complex about it, but there's enough to get everything done, which I think that's what makes a good transformation. The one thing I always hate is how this cockpit just loves to fold in of the slightest provocation. You just can't get it to hold in place sometimes. Okay, that out of the way, let's go ahead and take the Titan Master. We'll go ahead and plug him into place there. And that gives us our full robot mode of the second iteration of Generations Brainstorm. He does keep the same sleek proportions that Blur had, and while those are very appropriate for a speedster, it also feels very appropriate for the Autobot Brainiac that Brainstorm is. So you kind of have a mold that does definitely work in robot mode for both. I do think the robot mode pulls this off a lot better than the vehicle mode does. This is where I kind of feel like everything is more or less in its proper location. I'm going to go ahead and take a look at the head, of course, because this is technically the second time we've taken a look at the head. Definitely going in for the G1 look of Brainstorm. I do like the head design here. I like all the extra little fins and what looks like vents or something. It's a very serious head style, but he seems like a pretty serious guy, especially if you read the IDW books. He's got things going on, man. He's got issues. Don't talk to him really much. So overall, yes, I do still really like the color scheme on this toy. The grays are pretty well blended here. It does this nice little trick where the backside of his arms have been left barren, and then the front sides have all been painted to get that light gray where it needs to go. That makes his arms stand out. It makes his little shoulder fins here stand out a lot more. And it also gives him a really good visual color change, mixing in the colors a lot more. What also I like about the colors is those old school G1 style stickering details. Now it's all tampographed now, so it's not going to come off if you happen to dunk him in the bathtub or something. But for the most part, it's trying very hard to replicate the original G1's look, and I do like that. It's kind of a throwback to see some of this old school detail on some of these figures. You don't see too much of it on the retail figures. I don't know why this one got to have that. You know, at least around for the original Headmasters though. But I definitely like the old school look. There's only a little bit more teal though, so it's still kept as kind of a core color. Also, it still does that little trick I like, where the Autobot symbol kind of pokes through on his belly right there. I still kind of dig that. So overall, yeah, I think this robot mode pulls off the look of Brainstorm a lot better. He does have a few little things if you want to get really picky about G1 look. His cockpit's supposed to be more to his belly, and he's going to have a torso plate, you know, like where his Headmaster stats would come up. But I don't think that's much of a huge loss here. I think it still works well enough. And the little extra parts like, the wings on the shoulders and little fake wings here on the front of his arms, kind of passing off some of his extra detail, even if it didn't exist in vehicle mode, I think is holding things together just enough to make this a pretty good representation of Brainstorm. Now, in case you haven't seen the articulation on this guy before, here you go. We have the ball joint in the neck, which works pretty well. This one fits pretty snugly for a Titan Master, so good on you there. Shoulders work pretty well. You've got a hinge in the torso as well as a ball joint, so you've got nice range of motion. I keep calling that a ball joint. It's pinned in, but you still get a decent range. It's not as good as a ball joint, but it gets most of your jobs done. Bicep rotation works pretty well. There is a wrist rotation as well, always nice. Elbows, 90 degree. Waist joint does have a rotation. That has a spin to it. That's pretty good. It's only now I'm noticing the entire pelvis has been painted to make the teal match too. There is just a ton of paint on this guy. Ball joints in the hips, working out really good. Plenty of range. Knees, a little bit beyond 90. That's always appreciated. You have a full working thigh swivel as well. No real ankle rocks or anything. They're slanted, so he can stand a more natural angle. And if you want, yes, the wings also have a bit of hinge to them, so you can fold them back, get them out of the way. Depends on where you prefer to have them. I kind of like having them stuck straight out myself, but that's up to you. So that does give you plenty of articulation in this guy. Of course, it is pretty much the same stuff Blur had, along with just a few extra wings in the way here and there. But beyond that, pretty standard stuff. It's still really, really good. So I'm going to go ahead and give him one of his guns. It's the same standard gun that comes with Blur as well as Chrome Dome, so nothing terribly exciting about that. And just like Blur, you don't have to remove the front for transformation, but you can. Slides right off a pair of tabs. Now you have this massive shield that you can mount to his arm, or a massive rifle you want to hold in his hand, or if you want to get a little bit clever, you can also flip out this little piece here, and that will actually allow it to stand upright. Well, it's a little bit unbalanced, but it will allow it to stand upright. And if you look inside, not only do you have a spot where the gun can mount, you also have a groove in there where a Titan Master can peg in, making this kind of a I always kind of like fail when I'm trying to describe what exactly it creates. Sled is the best thing I can come up for it, but it does create something that other Titan Masters can ride along, a little improvised vehicle type thing, which I don't think is such a bad idea. It does definitely give you more playability and gives you something for other Titan Masters to do with the parts. So that's all well and good. So overall, like, if you want to have him just like armed up like this, he's pretty heavily armed as scientists go. So I don't know. I like it. I actually kind of like it. I kind of like it better than Blur with the dual cannons on the front. It just seems like it's getting more done, I guess. So that, in a nutshell, is Titan's Return Brainstorm. The vehicle mode is a bit of a stretch. There's just a few parts that should have been recast and remolded in order to really get the look they were going for as far as a deluxe Brainstorm. But I think the robot mode pulls it off well enough for me to still accept this as the Brainstorm in my collection. The articulation is still really good. The color palette really sets it apart from the US Blur. And it does still have plenty of things for Titan Masters to do, which gives it a nice level of playability. As for that extra $10, well, that's really going to depend. How much do you really want to see the original four Autobot Headmasters together? You know, it's going to be down to how much is it worth to you to see the entire cast reunited all at one time. So that I will leave as a decision to you. For me, though, it is kind of awesome seeing all four brought into the modern day together.